on top of a 1,000-year-old redwood in Humboldt County, California for 738 days to prevent the Pacific Lumber Company from chopping it down. From December 1997 to December 1999, Hill engaged in this act of civil disobedience to draw attention not only to the destruction of ancient redwoods, but also to the global assault on the environment. Eventually, Pacific Lumber agreed never to cut down the tree, which she had named Luna, and said it would also protect nearby trees. Here, Hill reflects on her motivations for the protest.
I didn't come from a background in activism, but when I first saw what was happening to the ancient redwoods in California, I fell to the ground and started crying and immediately got involved. It changed my life. Everyone thinks when they hear I'm the poster child of Treehuggers that I must be a hardcore, radical extremist, wacko, granola munching, you name it, all in capital letters, with quotes. But I was just dumped in the deep end of this entire movement. Not just tree sitting, not just forest issues, but the whole social, environmental, and consciousness movement, and said to myself, better swim or you're going to drown. So I started learning how to swim. I was in a situation with Luna where I had to learn to listen to nature and respect it, or die. My life was on such a precipice the entire time I was up there. It was just really fragile in so many ways. The first 3 months were so hard that I was praying to die. I didn't want to hurt that bad anymore. And yet, at the same time, I didn't want to give up. But when death did start to come, I started praying for life. I was constantly on this emotional roller coaster, spiritually and physically. It was one assault after another. One day, they were cutting down trees all around me, and I started crying and hugging Luna. I was crying because I felt ashamed to be in white skin. I felt ashamed to be a part of a race of people who perpetuated genocide thousands of years ago and have now made it our mission to perpetuate genocide on the rest of the planet and life in all its forms. It was eating me alive from the inside out. I was so angry and so hurt and ashamed, and I held on to Luna and was crying and apologizing over and over, saying, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. And when I finally sat up, I realized I was covered in sap. Climbing around in Luna before, I had gotten a little bit of sap on me, but I had never been covered like I was this day. I realized that sap was pouring out from all over her, actually pouring. And then, that's when it hit me. This was Luna communicating her grief. Sap is just like grief. It's not something you can wash away. It clings to you and becomes a part of who you are. And it was then that I realized nature was communicating with me. Later on, people sent me scientific proof that sap is one of the ways trees communicate. So I started paying attention. I started listening and getting answers from everything. From Luna, the birds, the bears, the shape of the pine needles. Everything became my teacher when I opened up. My relationship with Luna grew. I realized that Luna has been communicating with humankind for 1,000 years, and we just forgot how to listen. But I learned how to listen, and from that moment on, everything started coming to me. Sometimes I'd have to get beaten over the head a little bit before I'd go, oh yeah, thank you, what are you trying to tell me? My connection with Luna and my connection with nature is what kept me going, kept me alive, helped teach me the vital lessons I needed to learn when I was about to give up or make a very big mistake. And I'm forever thankful for that. One of the lessons I learned, and something I use a lot now, is how to survive a storm. I nearly died up there in the worst winter storms recorded in the history of California. The trees taught me that the way to make it through those storms, and the storms of life, is to stay rooted and centered, but not rigid. The branches and trees that try too hard to stand strong and straight are the ones that break. The ones that make it through are the ones that know how to bend and flow and let go. So I've been using that now in my life. I use it when I'm being barraged by the media, by grassroots activists, by mainstream community, by everyone. I just bend and flow when I see the wind coming. I loosen up and get ready to get blown, and then I kind of flex back into place. And I'm ready to get up the next morning and do it all over again. The legacy that I left behind was a vision of a better world. We protected a grove of old-growth forests, and we left a living embodiment of what that vision of a better world is all about. A world where the last of our ancient and old-growth forests and wildlife are protected. A world where the watersheds we're all a part of are protected, even if we live in LA, Chicago, Detroit, or New York City. All those places that look nothing like nature anymore are actually part of a watershed. And that watershed is the nature that beats its pulse underneath the asphalt and the concrete and steel. That watershed is our lifeblood. It's what keeps us alive. To live a life of service for a better world is a legacy that doesn't disappear. It's an imprint, and that imprint can be negative or positive depending on the actions and the choices we make every single moment of every single day. I have to tell you, the coolest people I've ever met, young and old, are the ones who are out there giving their lives for a good cause. They glow more. They're the most beautiful, magnificent, powerful people I've ever seen. They're much more powerful than the richest person and more beautiful than any model because their beauty and power resonates from deep within the life force all the way through their body and shines out. I've never wanted to kneel in front of a model or an actor or actress or a corporate billionaire, but I want to bow myself before people who are activists or who work for the common good. Money is not honor. Doing something of real value with one's life is honor.
Tillman joined the Army with his brother Pat in 2002, and they served together in Iraq and Afghanistan. Pat was killed in Afghanistan on April 22nd, 2004. Kevin, who was discharged in 2005, wrote a powerful piece. Here is some of its text.
It is Pat's birthday on November 6th, and elections are the day after. Gets me thinking about a conversation I had with Pat before we joined the military. He spoke about the risk with signing the papers. How once we committed, we were at the mercy of the American leadership and the American people. How we could be thrown in a direction not of our own volition. How fighting as a soldier will leave us without a voice until we get out. Much has happened since we handed over our voice. Somehow we were sent to invade a nation because it was a direct threat to the American people, or to the world, or harbored terrorists, or was involved in the September 11th attacks, or received weapons-grade uranium from Niger, or had mobile weapons labs, or WMD, or had a need to be liberated, or we needed to establish a democracy, or stop an insurgency, or stop a civil war we created that can't be called a civil war even though it is. Something like that. Somehow, America has become a country that projects everything that it is and condemns everything. Somehow America has become a country that projects everything that it is not and condemns everything that it is. Somehow our elected leaders were subverting international law and humanity by setting up secret prisons around the world, secretly kidnapping people, secretly holding them indefinitely, secretly not charging them with anything, secretly torturing them. Somehow that overt policy of torture became the fault of a few bad apples in the military. Somehow back at home, support for the soldiers meant having a 5-year-old kindergartner scribble a picture with crayons and send it overseas, or slapping stickers on cars, or lobbying Congress for an extra pad in a helmet. It's interesting that a soldier on his third or fourth tour should care about a drawing from a 5-year-old, or a faded sticker on a car as his friends die around him, or an extra pad in a helmet, as if it will protect him when an IED throws his vehicle 50 feet into the air as his body comes apart and his skin melts to the seat. Somehow, the more soldiers that die, the more legitimate the illegal invasion becomes. Somehow, American leadership, whose only credit is lying to its people and illegally invading a nation, has been allowed to steal the courage, virtue, and honor of its soldiers on the ground. Somehow, those afraid to fight an illegal invasion decades ago are allowed to send soldiers to die for an illegal invasion they started. Somehow faking character, virtue, and strength is tolerated. Somehow profiting from tragedy and horror is tolerated. Somehow the death of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people is tolerated. Somehow subversion of the Bill of Rights and the Constitution is tolerated. Somehow suspension of habeas corpus is supposed to keep this country safe. Somehow torture is tolerated. Somehow lying is tolerated. Somehow reason is being discarded for faith, dogma, and nonsense. Somehow American leadership managed to create a more dangerous world. Somehow a narrative is more important than reality. Somehow America has become a country that projects everything that it is not and condemns everything that it is. Somehow the most reasonable, trusted, and respected country in the world has become one of the most irrational, belligerent, feared, and distrusted countries in the world. Somehow being politically informed, diligent, and skeptical has been replaced by apathy through active ignorance. Somehow the same incompetent, narcissistic, virtueless, vacuous, malicious criminals are still in charge of this country. Somehow this is tolerated. Somehow nobody is accountable for this. In a democracy, the policy of the leaders is the policy of the people. So don't be shocked when our grandkids bury much of this generation as traitors to the nation, to the world, and to humanity. Most likely, they will come to know that the somehow was nurtured by fear, insecurity, and indifference, leaving the country vulnerable to unchecked, unchallenged parasites. Luckily, this country still is a democracy. People still have a voice. People still can take action. It can start after Pat's birthday.
Howard Zinn's favorite poet, Marge Piercy. Piercy is an American poet, novelist, feminist, and social activist. Her work focuses on issues of social justice and feminism, and displays an ardent commitment to the dream of social change. Here is her poem, The Low Road, which was read at Howard Zinn's memorial service.
What can they do to you? Whatever they want. They can set you up. They can break you. They can break your fingers. They can burn your brain with electricity. Lure you with drugs so you can't walk, can't remember. They can take your child, wall up your lover. They can do anything you can't blame them from doing. And how can you stop them? Alone, you can fight. You can refuse. You can take what revenge you can, but they roll over you. But two people fighting back to back can cut through a mob. A snake dancing file can break a cordon. An army can meet an army. Two people can keep each other sane, can give support, conviction, love, massage, hope, sex. Three people are a delegation, a wedge, a committee. With four, you can play bridge and start an organization. With six, you can rent a whole house, eat pie for dinner with no seconds, and hold a fundraising party. A dozen make a demonstration. 100 fill a hall. 1,000 have solidarity and your own newsletter. 10,000 power and your own paper. 100,000 your own media. 10 million your own country. It goes on one at a time. It starts when you care to act. It starts when you do it again after they say no. It starts when you say we, and you know who you mean. And each day, you mean one more.
So much for coming tonight to hear our interpretation of Voices of a People's History and to celebrate the legacy and life of Howard Zinn. I don't know about you guys, but I'm feeling pretty fucking inspired right now and excited. And so I hope that you will join me in thanking everyone who helped us put this wonderful event together today, including the Political Science Department, the Center for Gender, Sexuality, and Activism, Irene Genzier, Graham Wilson, the BU Anti-War Coalition, Amnesty International at BU. And more people: Tyler Cullis, Zaina Ozier, Jaree Brahman, Sharzad Nabaluchi, Kristen Martin, Nate Goldman, and Kareem Shahaya. Yay! And also, let's hear it for the wonderful cast tonight. I'm going to invite them to...